I'm Matt Bishar with NAREIT.com. Joining me here at NAREIT's Washington, D.C. headquarters is Jeremy Banoff, Senior Managing Director with FPL Associates. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's start by talking about the recent NAREIT Compensation Survey, which was just published. What was different about this year's edition, and what were some of the more noteworthy findings?
Sure. So this year, first of all, picked up on the record level of participation that we've had. We had 135 participants. That marked a 50% participation rate, of which 75% of the market was represented through those participants. So widely participated in. And we covered a number of different topics, everything from organizational design, staffing, structuring, expense loads, changes in salaries, bonuses, equity, board of director comp, employment agreements. I mean, it's over 300 pages, so quite a bit. I wouldn't even know where to start in terms of the noteworthy findings, but I did have a few that I printed out that might be of interest. Number one, 92% of companies have already started to or plan to hire this year, which is a remarkable number. Plus, retention of top talent is the #1 concern right now, based upon a laundry list of choices. And I trust, 3 or 4 years ago, this was not the case. So it bodes very well for the industry. Also, in terms of compensation programs, total shareholder return is the #1 metric that has been added to programs, which is not surprising to see. And just over half, 51% of companies utilize employment agreements. And that's actually the lowest percentage we've seen in several editions of these surveys. So certainly a trend that we expect to still see to continue, but not by necessarily a broad stroke.
And not too long ago, the Wall Street Journal had an article on REIT executive pay in which FPL's analysis was featured. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the study found?
Yeah, sure. So the study itself, the article was really about staying on pay and how well REITs have done in responding to the structures of the compensation programs. But some other noteworthy findings from the actual study was last year, the average payout as it relates to target was 126%, which shows you that it was a strong performance year because most REIT executives got paid above target. Also, of the 3 main components, salary, cash bonuses, and long-term incentives, cash bonuses were the #1 driver of the increase in pay increases. And finally, when we looked across all the executives for the second consecutive year, at least 50% of compensation was a form of long-term incentives or equity, which is actually a nice thing to see as a shareholder and an investor.
Great. And you spend a lot of time working directly with REIT compensation committees. What are they spending more time on these days?
Well, it's funny because the meetings are so much longer than they had been just 5 years ago. So there's a lot that we cover in those meetings. I would say the goal-setting process, what defines target performance, what's outperformance, what's underperformance. There's been a lot of time on that. Plus, these days, you're seeing a lot of boards and comp committees really focusing on, do we have the right team in place? What is long-term our strategy? So it's both compensation strategy, but actually the strategy of the company overall and making sure we have the right people and then the right way to reward for execution of that strategy.
And lastly, there's been a lot in the news recently on compensation items that have come out by the SEC, including clawback policies, disclosure around pay performance, and others like that. What is the timing and likelihood that these developments become reality?
It's a good question. So first of all, a lot of this is going back to 2010 with the Dodd-Frank Act, where this was introduced. Clawback policies were mentioned then, as were some of the other items that are now finally getting the attention. And last year we saw the highly controversial CEO pay ratio, where you have to take the CEO's pay as a multiple of your average employee's pay and calculate that. That's been stalled. It got over 100,000 comments, not surprising given some of the contentious nature of that. And actually there's a bill right now in the Senate to possibly repeal that. So we'll see if that holds true. I do think clawback policies will, in fact, get here sooner rather than later. There was just a proposal earlier this month by the SEC. Still some things, though, in those proposals that's a little bit controversial on how it would apply. And finally, this new pay-for-performance way chart that every public company would have to show the level of pay for their CEO and the average of the other executives compared to their peer group, as well as performance as well in terms of total shareholder return. Also expected to get a lot of comment letters. So I would say there's a lot going on right now, probably at least a year or two till we actually see this come into application. But certainly it will mark a change if it goes through as it's currently proposed.
Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For more on this and other REIT news and analysis, be sure to visit REIT.com.